Hello. Today we will be learning print statements and variable types. First of all, however, we need to learn how to open our Python file. You will see if you just double click it like you would with the usual file, it will bring up a command prompt and then close it. What you're going to want to do to actually access this and program in it is open idle, which comes defaultly installed with Python. Or if you have a different code editor that you would like to use, which I would not recommend because this tutorial will be using idle, you can use that. So once you launch up idle, you should be faced with something that looks somewhat like this. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to change idle into dark mode. You don't have to do this, it makes no actual difference to the code, I just prefer dark mode. If you want to change your idle into dark mode, go to Options and click Configure Idle. Then, to change it to dark mode, you go to Highlights, and where it says Idle Classic or whatever mode it is on, you change it to Idle Dark. If you would wish, you can change this to Custom Theme, and maybe later there will be a tutorial on how to create custom themes. But for now, if you want to change it, hit Apply and OK. Now, to open a file, we are going to go to File and click Open. From here, you need to navigate to where your code is, and you go to File and click Open. From here, which will then bring up this menu as well. Then you will need to navigate to where your code is. I have this pinned here, so I can just go into this, and here is the file I'll be using, as you can see here. Now when we click Open, it launches up this. This code file here is this. So what we are now going to do is, first of all, we are going to use our print statement, which looks like this. Now, if I run this currently, which you can do either by going to Run and clicking Run Module, and idle should be warning you, unless you've disabled this, which I would not recommend, that you must save this. You want to click OK, which will let you run it. And as you can see currently, it doesn't print anything. This is your shell, by the way. This is also what loads up when you launch idle, and it's what anything that you print in, or any inputs or anything, will show up in. So the reason that nothing has happened is because we haven't told it to print anything. So inside these brackets which we have, what you're going to want to do is, for now, we will put just some speech marks in here. This is what we will later learn to be called a string. Now, you can choose between either speech marks or quote marks, as I'm going to call them. I prefer speech marks, but it doesn't make any difference which one you use. Now, we can type whatever we want into here, and it will display this on the screen. So if we print hello world, run it, save that, and it prints hello world. Now, of course, that's not the only option for what you can print. You can print anything. You can have any character, really. The only thing I will say is you don't want to use a backslash. The reason for this is backslash is used for some things. So what you can do with a backslash is, amongst other things, you can do \n, which is very useful in print statements, as it allows you to create a new line. Because if we print this, just run this quickly, it just prints it on one line. However, if we do \n and then press H, by the way, it will read this as \n and then H. It will not read it as \nh. When we run it, we can see it's printed all this, and then it's also printed H, which is quite nice. So you can print multiple lines if you would like. Anyways, of course, that's not the only thing that you can do with a print statement. Another thing you can do with a print statement is numbers. So right here is just the number 12. And you don't need any quote marks, speech marks, whatever you want to call them. You just type it in and you'll see it prints 12. However, if I were to tell it to print hi, it wouldn't like that, and it doesn't do it. It says name error, name hi is not defined. Now the reason for this is it thinks I want hi as in a variable, which we are going to do now. So we are going to create our variable called string, and the first variable type we're going to do is one of the ones we've already mentioned, a string. So what you have to do to declare your variable, which in this case we are calling string, is you simply type string space, or no, you simply put your variable name, which we are using string, equals, and you can put spaces here. It's common code technique to put a space before and after the equals, as it makes it more readable, and then put your quote mark, your speech marks, or your quote marks, and simply put your text inside of this, same as if you were writing a print statement. Then, inside of your print statement, instead of using the quote marks here, we can put our string variable inside. Now if we run this, it will print the text that I put inside my string variable. Another type of variable is an integer. Now you may have come across this word before. An integer is a number, but it's not just any number. An integer is a whole number. It has no decimal places. So for instance, we can put 13. And if we tell it to print our integer, it will print 13. Again, integers, quite useful. Now, there is also another way you can represent a number, which is a float. Now, unfortunately, as you may have noticed earlier, these get highlighted with purple, which is the same as a print statement. Now, int, str, and float are all variable types. Int and str are shortened down for integer and string. Now, you do not want to type int or str and name your variable that, because int and str and float and all the other variable names that there are have their uses, and you do not want to rename them. So for this, we're going to call it float underscore 1. Also, a quick thing before we talk about floats. When you're naming a variable, you can name a variable a lot of things. One thing you cannot do is start with a number. Let's say we just remove this float one for a second, and we do 1p equals 0. And let's try and print our 1p variable. It tells us invalid decimal literal. Effectively, this means you cannot do this. You have to start without a number. I can do p1 equals 0, and if we print p1, it works. You just can't start with it. Anyways, back to our float. So, float, and of course we have to make sure we don't rewrite that. Now, a float is another number, as I said. Instead of storing whole numbers this time, however, a float will store numbers with decimal places. So let's say I put 13.1 and then tell it to print my float variable. It is now going to print 13.1, just as it should. There is, however, a limit on how long a float variable can be. As you can see here, I've typed out a longer float. If I run it, then we will get this. Now, if we count how many characters, that's 3, that's 15. I don't know why it's like this, it just is. There's I'm fairly sure there are ways you can change this. I'm fairly sure it's a system settings thing, but for now it's just that's the limit, and that's what we're going to go with. Now, next up, and our final variable type for today, is a boolean. A boolean, let me just check how this is spelled. A boolean, represented by bool, is true or false. Now, if we type true here, and we print our boolean, we will see true. If we put false here, and we print our boolean, we will see false. However, if we put false without a capital letter, we will get an error, because false without a capital F does not exist, unless you've made that a variable previously. And it will ask us, did you mean false with a capital F? Another thing you can do is, if we just rename this to true, you can, using the int operator that we talked about earlier, which this is one of the reasons you don't want to rewrite it, what this will do is convert things like booleans into integers. So now if we, inside of the brackets of our int variable, type boolean, which is our variable name, and we print it, we will see that true's value is 1. And if we change this to false, we will see its value is 0. Now, if we type bool here instead, and then change this to 0, we can see that 0 can be transitioned into false, and 1 into true. Now, in the next video, we will be talking about more variable types, specifically tuples, lists, and dictionaries, which have slightly more complicated uses. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.